I am going to talk about something more cold, I guess, economy. When we say economy, it looks like it leaves the human parts out, but in a way, it does affect everything. And I have to say, I am not from an academic. I am from an academic background, but I left the academy a long time ago, and I'm working as a freelance in the business market. So I'm going to try to bring a non-academic perspective to economics and how war affects economy and different factors in economy. But before I start with the economy part, when Dr. Zafer announced this seminar and asked me if I wanted to participate, I really got excited in a way because I was frustrating. I was thinking about the war. I found myself in depression for a couple of days, knowing that something is going on, and war has been around the globe since the beginning of human interaction, I guess. But then again, with the social media being open to all the news and being able to follow it closely, I noticed that I was frustrated, and I thought that a lot of people felt the same way. And so it was a great opportunity to at least being able to talk about it and being able to put out a perspective on it. So thank you for that one more time, Dr. Zafer. And there were two topics that actually got my attention. One was war and economics, because yes, I work within the economy, so I see the implications. And the other one was stress management, because I'm also an MBSR teacher. I'm a trained mindfulness-based stress reduction teacher. So how to deal with stress is another part of this whole thing. But I would like to, if you allow me, I would like to bring in a brief perspective about the economic part of it, and then maybe end with a short meditation, just to give out a technique on how we deal with stress, because as health professionals, most of you all know the anatomy of stress, how it is. It might be necessary in order to survive most of the times. So it's not something that we can or we should avoid. But bringing back the body into an homeostasis stage is very important as well for our survival. So there are techniques for that. So towards the end, after all this stressful talking, I will be giving a 3 minutes of breathing meditation. So let me share my screen. Okay, so to put it out there in an economical term, war affects a lot of things, starting from employment, starting from GDP, the damages, the inflation is very important part of it, the psychological costs. We talked about post-traumatic stress orders, but it's not just, can be calculated within the duration of the war, but it goes post-war. So some of these implications and effects may not be calculated economically in a proper way. But yeah, first of all, there is a damage to the infrastructure and a decline in the working population, because most of the healthy population, they join the war. So there will be effects of that after the war as well, which in a way economists say sometimes that it's a positive thing because it creates employment after the war. But there is immediate effects on inflation, shortages, which we are currently already seeing with the oil, the uncertainty to the financial system and the system itself, the national debts And so basically it's a disruption to the normal economic activity of the countries. So to get a bit deeper in inflation, war leads to inflation. And what does inflation means? It's basically means loss of people's savings. Not that it disappears, but it doesn't value as much. So people actually spend years saving so that they can buy a house, or they can change their cars, or they can send their kids to schools. And with inflation coming in and hitting them, they are no longer are able to do that. Even the war ends in 1 month or 2 months, the effects of inflation continues after that, which creates a big loss of confidence in the financial system, because people may not know actually how to economically survive through all that. So, for countries to cover the cost of war, they need to print more money, which furthermore leads to hyperinflation and furthermore lowering of the value of savings. And there is also the cost push inflation factor, because there are sometimes shortages of goods and services and shortages of workers, which leads to a rise in prices. And we see it with the oil very clearly. I mean, within the last 2 weeks in North Cyprus, there have been I think 3 times an increase in oil prices, and there had been queues in front of the oil stations and people were in panic. And yes, maybe right now some people were afford to fill up their tanks, but they don't know what's going to happen in upcoming month, because if the prices keep going on, there will be a serious shortage, which will lead to the electricity services, which will affect furthermore the other services. So definitely the shortage of goods and services is something that people clearly feels it immediately when there is a war going around. And Russia is a major supplier of oil and gas, and there are economic sanctions, so the supply will be reduced and the prices will further increase. And not only oil and gas, but Ukraine and Russia together, they also are one of the biggest producers of wheat. And so it will affect the prices of wheat and the supply of wheat, which will lead to the shortages in bread. And when people think about it, they think that, okay, well, other countries may jump in to, plant wheat and kind of fill that gap. But another thing is, again, Russia is one of the biggest producers of fertilizers, and they have already announced that they won't be selling it to abroad. So that gap may not be that easy to fill out. So we will be seeing that in further days and months, depending on the duration. And so with the national debt, the countries that are engaging in war, they cannot end that war without borrowing. So government, in order to support the military costs, because the military costs are immense right now, because they need a higher technology, so they kind of invest in technology. And but where did that money come from? Either they borrow it from other countries, which after the war they have to repay, which will put more pressure on their domestic economy, or they print more money, which either way will lower the value of the money and leave them in deeper national debt. So it doesn't help. So the military, to support the military costs, the national debt definitely increases. And not only during the war, but post-war borrowings continue for the reconstruction and recreation of a welfare state. So, for example, in World War II, By the end of the war, United Kingdom national debt has increased 150%, but after the war, it has increased to 240%. So we cannot think that, okay, the war has finished, the peace has been secured, the economy will be back to normal. No, it does go on for a longer time period, which affects more people, more generation. And for example, in the same war, World War II, United States made a profit. On the contrary to United Kingdom, it made a profit by selling arms to United Kingdom. So it had less economic impact on national debt. So we understand that where the war is being fought, those countries will be affected much more. And there are some other countries who are behind the curtains, and they actually make a profit out of it for a shorter time. But when we say profit, I mean, personally, I cannot think of it as a profit of just one country, but is it profitable for the whole human race? So the answer definitely is no, no matter where you look from. Another thing to think about is the financial cost of war, the opportunity cost of military spending. I mean, rather than spending on military, today I heard that Ukraine is purchasing from Poland. I think they wanted to purchase F-16s. They're also purchasing from Turkey, the drones and everything. And those equipments are expensive. So think about all that money. It could have been spent on health, on education, on infrastructure, but rather it is being spent on something that will not help anybody. So there is a huge opportunity cost of that military spending. Talking about human cost of lives is, it cannot be even measured because every life is valuable. So, and the further cost of rebuilding after the devastation of war. Again, all these depend on kind of war, length of war, where and how it was fought. So sometimes war abroad, yes, they boost the domestic demand. For example, again, United States in World War II, Korean War, Vietnam War. The domestic demand has increased because people purchased more on domestic brands. So the economy was actually boosting while the country was fighting abroad. So I think it's safe to say that the United States has always been clever about war, always fighting them abroad. That's a cynical cleverism. And there is also civil wars. I mean, we see that, we hear about that all the time. We had one in Cyprus. Turkey has been having one for the past 30, 40 years. So a civil war leads to a collapse in tourism, foreign investment, domestic investment. So when there is a conflict within a country's border and say no other countries involved, still the economy goes down. The life expectancy becomes shorter, the GDP is lost. And there was a 2007 research, Africa's Missing Billions, made by Oxfam. And he actually put out that the estimated cost of war is almost equal to the amount of international aid. So think about how many millions of dollars of international aid all these developed countries are sending to Africa. They could have just, prevented that by not having a war in Africa. But since there are so many other political factors like trying to distribute the land between different groups, so there are political factors that are supporting those groups, and other countries selling military equipment, therefore profiting from those conflicts. But in the end, when you do the balance, No, it is not profitable, because while somebody is gaining from that conflict, the whole world is actually losing from that conflict, because in order to kind of put things back in place, a lot of reserves go there. So yes, an ongoing war also, when there is a war in a country, there is an increased availability of weapons. So the crime, organized crime and armed violence, these definitely increase. We see that in Africa. We see kids walking around with pistols and rifles because it's available, it is there, it kind of became their culture. So they join in and become a part of the organized crime because they don't have any other place to go. So these cannot be measured in terms of economy, maybe. And yes, all the wars end at one point or another, but there is, they leave behind an army of demobilized soldiers. Post-traumatic stress disorder was one of the most important things, I guess. People coming back from wars, from Iraq War, from Vietnam War, those people cannot just come in and join in the economy and become productive citizens. So there is a long period of unemployment, because it takes time for economy to restore itself and start employing people. There's a loss of qualified employees, so it takes time for education to come in and bring those people to that level of qualification so that they can contribute to the economy. The payments for the governments of borrowings, reparation payments. For example, Germany paid a lot of huge amounts of reparation payments after World War II because of the actions that they have taken. And again, most of the governments go for, because they don't have any other tools, so they go for printing money, which leads to inflation. So years of hyperinflation in aftermath of war. And the psychological costs, which are harder to estimate, which are harder to calculate and put out in terms of numbers, but the pain of death, the suffering, the fear, the disability. Azize gave us a very touching quotes from people who suffered, who have seen war. And I don't know how, what's the price of taking those pain from those people? I guess it's not even, it may not even be possible in a lifetime. So war leaves out broken people and a broken economy. But people do talk about economic benefits of war, but that's my personal question marks in the brackets because I don't believe in those benefits. But yeah, during the war or maybe aftermath of the war, some economies go for a full employment to recover the, to rebuild the cities, to maybe hire people during the war for certain services. So since the economy has already gone down, it starts going up in a way. So there has to be an economic growth after the war. And there is an increased rate of innovation during the war because war technology needs a lot of innovation. And so there's always a, I wouldn't call it a benefit, but there's always an implication of technology and innovation, which could be used in some other places. So we cannot say that because of war we have technological innovation. We could still have technological innovation without the war. So again, I have to state that I personally doubt the term economic benefits of war. And for example, in World War I, women entered the labor market. because of the lack of employees. Before that, women were not part of the labor market. So the war can also change the social attitudes. So it kind of looks like a good thing, but then again, why weren't women in the labor market? Did we need a war for that? So and when you look at the history of humans, there has always been a war, there has always been a conflict. But in the past times, maybe it could have been considered more economically beneficial for the one who has won the war. Because what they would do, think about Vikings, they would jump on their sails, go down to a new land, and they would plunder wealth and land from other countries. The Vikings did that, the British did that, the Dutch did that, the Portuguese did that with America. So it was more economically beneficial because they didn't have much technological cost. So it was a cheap war. They would basically find a new land and plunder it, get all the wealth and leave. So it could have been considered beneficial, but now in the modern times, the technology of it is very expensive to run, and all the wars require fuel, munitions, food, and with the world that is so interconnected now, the supply of goods and wealth depend on trade. So in modern times, economical benefits of war no longer can be spoken about. And so this is a graphic that shows a bunch of goods, the platinum, silver, gold, after a month of Russia and Ukraine tensions. So you see the graphic, how the prices directly go up in the last quarter of it because of some of these are used in weaponry and some of these are being traded, and there is this insecurity with the markets, so the prices are affected. And I also found this while looking, and it got my attention because it also has Cyprus in it. So the highest economic costs of violence as a percentage of the GDP. So you can see that for Syria, 59% of the GDP is equal to the economic cost of violence. So more than half of the GDP they spend on it is the cost of violence, and in Cyprus as well. But of course, at that time, the GDP of Cyprus were small, but still it gives you the comparison, how much cost of violence was there when thinking about in terms of the GDP. And this is, it's a 2015 results, 2016, sorry, a World Economic Forum. And it says basically 65.6 million people around the world had been forced from their homes. So basically it's the population of United Kingdom. And Institute of Economics and Peace estimates that the conflict and violence costs are 13.6 trillion in 2015. This is for the whole world. The military spending is 5.6 trillion. The spending on internal security, 4.9 trillion. Losses from conflict, losses from crime. So think about what could have been done with that money if there wasn't war, because these are actual numbers, these are actual resources. So these resources could have been used for something else, and we could have been living in a different world right now. And this shows the estimated impact of this Ukraine-Russia crisis on global economic growth and it estimates up until 2024. So up to 2 years. So as you see, the darkest blue lines is where we are right now, but the impact of it will increase in 2023 and will start going down in 2024, but it will be higher than what it is right now. The most impacted one will be Russia, and then Eurozone, UK. So as you see, United States still, again, very smartly staying all behind this. But yeah, it will continue, the economic impact of it. And what economy does not put in numbers and not forgets but turns a blind eye to, I would like to say, is child trafficking, women trafficking, organ trafficking, child soldiers. I mean, it was yesterday that I read a news saying that almost 2,000 children are missing in Ukraine so far. So where are they? Who are they with? So how the economy will measure these, what will be the impact of those, cannot be measured by economy. But yes, these are also the costs of war that cannot be quantified. So yes, and I am stressed out when thinking about all these. They may be numbers, but they're stressful thinking about all these things. And so, as I said, I would like to invite you to 3 minutes of breathing space meditation. It is not to get rid of stress, because as we say, stress is important for survival. It can be necessary. But managing it, being able to manage it, gives us more power and will to continue. So if you allow me, I'm inviting you to take a moment, bringing your attention to what is happening here and now for you in your body. You may close your eyes or keep them half open without focusing anywhere. And turning your attention to your posture, maybe grounding your feet on the ground, and notice the sensations at the sole of your feet, where your feet touches to the ground, straightening your back a bit. We all sit in front of the computers, but a straight back helps us to breathe more naturally. Opening your shoulders, maybe rolling them back a bit so that it helps with your back. And your arms and hands relaxed on your laps. Just take a moment. Just observe what is going on in your body. Feeling the sensations of your body, maybe in the places where it touches on the chair, touches on the ground, or maybe you can feel your clothes touching on your skin. What are the sensations that come to your attention? Just observe them without trying to find anything. Just allow what is right now for you to come up to your attention. Maybe there's a tension on your neck. Maybe you may notice that there's a tingling or heat on your fingers. Just observe with your inner eye what is going on in your body. And how is your breathing right now? Allow yourself a moment to notice your natural breath. your inhale, your exhale, how it is flowing from your nose, through your throat, your lungs, and your stomach, and leaving from the same place. Follow your breathing in and breathing out without worrying if it is okay, if it is too short, if it is too long. Just observe what it is as it is. And turning your attention to your thoughts. What is on your mind right now? There may be 1,000 thoughts, or there may be a repeating thought, or maybe when you turn your attention to your mind, you will find an empty space for a moment. That's also nice. But whatever it is, without judging it, without overthinking on it, just observe what is on your mind. And notice the nature of your thoughts, how they come and go, they pop out, and then they disappear. And your feelings, gently bring your attention to your feelings right now. Notice what you have in your body. Maybe it can be a feeling of excitement, it can be a feeling of boredom, of an anxiety, or maybe a joy. And see how they are represented in your body, how every feeling has a physical sensation attached to it that explains itself to you. Maybe in your stomach, or in your throat, or in your heart. And notice if your mind labels these physical sensations. And bringing your attention back to your breathing, notice how you can keep all these physical sensations, thoughts, and feelings together in your awareness, all at the same time. How they can change from one breath to another. How sometimes a thought coming forwards, taking its toll and disappearing. Or a physical sensation catching your attention and then dissolving. The ever-changing nature of life. While we keep on breathing, inhaling and exhaling, and accepting everything as it is right now, without any judgment, as it is. Okay, well, thank you.
We need it after all those topics.
Yeah, well, I mean, this breathing space, okay, in MBSR, there are many different meditations. Body scan is very important. Sitting meditation, where you actually spend almost an hour observing your thoughts, your body, your physical sensations. So, but kind of putting everything in this 3 minutes of breathing space, it actually can help us get through the day, because we do notice, we do realize that our stress levels are increasing. Hearing in news, not being able to catch a deadline, you know, being overwhelmed by a lot of things. It is, I do believe that it is healthy to give your mind and your body a space so it can kind of come down. And as I said, with the anatomy of stress, there are so many hormones that pop out when our stress levels increase, and that's healthy. What is not healthy is that if we cannot bring our body to a state of homeostasis. So these breathing techniques actually help us to bring the stress levels down, the hormone levels down, because when we're under stress, a lot of our systems do not operate, like our digestive system, our reproductive system, and even our learning stops for a moment, because, you know, the body feels like it is under a huge danger of survival. So it cannot worry about reproducing or digesting or learning new things. So it is, I believe it's very important. As I said, I mean, war is something that brings for all of us all those stress levels up. And it may not be easy, but still we have to give our body the chance to come down a bit so we can continue. So thank you for allowing me space to talk about all these.
Thank you very much, Evan. Thank you. Do we have any questions, any comments?